Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Dasha Burns. It is Tuesday, June 10th.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. Good morning. How you doing, Dasha?
I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there. Good to hear it. The first story driving the day remains the same story that's been driving the day all week so far. And that is the standoff between protesters and law enforcement in Los Angeles. And in fact, in other cities around the US as well now. Dasha, we'll get into all of that in a minute. It's obviously still the biggest story of the day. We saw Donald Trump deploying another 2,000 National Guard to Los Angeles last night. And I think one of the main frames through which we'll be discussing this morning, we're going to see Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, is up in the House committee this morning, and we'll no doubt be being asked about that as well.
Yeah, a lot of intertwining storylines and obviously deeply political at this point.
You bet. It's been deeply political since the start. The second thing we're to talk about today, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's decision last night to, he said, retire all 17 members of the committee that advises on vaccines. Let's face it, he fired them, right? He fired all of the people that advise him on vaccines. Via an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, Dasha, I believe that's how many of them discovered that this was happening. This is something he said, or he appeared to have said he wasn't going to do before he took the job. Last night, he went ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, and finding out about your job via the media is pretty par for the course for the Trump world.
Pretty par for the course. There you go. I mean, it's a massive story in terms of the implications of where this might be going. Everyone knows RFK Jr.'s stance on vaccines going back a very long time. He made certain assurances to senators, most notably the Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, before he took the job and before he got his vote of confidence, that he wouldn't stray too far, essentially, from what have been seen as the norms on this stuff. He now seems to be straying further away from where Senator Cassidy would have expected, I think.
There's a lot that the White House and that Republicans overall are very excited about when it comes to the MAHA movement and the kinds of people that they've been able to bring into the fold that weren't really political to begin with and certainly not Republicans to begin with. However, this vaccine issue, that was the biggest concern about RFK Jr. They were hoping that this is the area that he would avoid, get people on the low-hanging fruit, the issues with big food, big pharma, the bad stuff that's in our food that a lot of people are on board with or at least want interrogated and talked about. This is what they were hoping he'd stay away from, and he seems to be, at this point, driving right at it.
Yeah, let's see where that one goes. I was going to say the third big story driving the day is the big, beautiful bill, as we are obliged to call it. I actually think, Dasha, looking at the scenes coming in from Kyiv overnight, I don't know if you've seen this, it would seem that Russia has deployed by far the biggest attack on the Ukrainian capital of the war so far overnight, and looking at absolutely horrific scenes of what looked like random drone strikes right across the city on residential buildings. It's too early to tell just how bad it is, but lots and lots of people reporting out of Kyiv that this is on a completely different scale to anything they've seen before. Vladimir Putin shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but doesn't look like a man who's on the verge of brokering peace, as Donald Trump insisted and promised.
Not at all. That's what I was just going to say. And this does seem like retaliation for Ukraine's attack. I think we were all waiting to see how Putin would handle it and whether, the White House would escalate peace talks in the wake of that, would try to mitigate things behind the scenes. It looks like there's no sign of de-escalation. In fact, it's only escalated.
You bet. And when President Trump was describing this, he was sort of giving it, well, they did this on one hand, so this happens on the other hand. It's probably worth just reiterating for listeners that what Ukraine did was a sort of surgical strike upon the bombers that have been bombing their cities.
The bombers meaning the weapons, not people.
Right. What Vladimir Putin is doing is randomly killing civilians in their beds. These things are not the same. And it's hard to see how pressuring Ukraine for peace in any way correlates with what's happening and what we've seen last night. Let's talk about LA, Dasha, because we saw more scenes last night, not dissimilar to what we've seen on previous nights. This standoff between federal and state, between protester and law enforcement, doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon.
No, I do think it's slightly more contained now. The LAPD does seem to be more unified. Watching the coverage overnight, it seems like there's more control over the scene. And that might be in part due to the show of force. That might be LAPD responding more aggressively and local officials doing more, or all of the above. But what I can tell you from my conversations with folks in and near the White House is that they feel like this is playing out exactly how they wanted to. Not that they wanted to see protests or riots or any of that, but if there are going to be these protests, that this is how they wanted Democrats to be responding, frankly, politically.
By which you mean Democrats appearing to align themselves with violent protesters waving Mexican flags and setting things on fire, right? And so that the White House can say, well, look, we're on this side of law and order. Look at these guys.
That's exactly right. This is the messaging that's going to be coming out of the White House, that this is another issue, another 80-20 issue, as they've been calling it, where Democrats are on the 20. And this is absolutely informed by what happened in the summer of 2020, according to my sources. They felt like in 2020, they took a slightly more politically correct approach. They didn't go in as aggressively, and they watched so many cities get destroyed or get harmed, and people, citizens, were not happy about it. And they are putting forward this show of force between the National Guard and now especially with the active duty Marines that they have sent in. They want that to be a message to not just LA, but to other cities that if you don't control these protests, if you let them become riots, this is coming to your city, because summer of 2020 is not going to be repeated in the second Trump administration.
That's interesting. So we've seen Donald Trump first sending in 2,000 National Guard, then doubling that deployment last night to 4,000. As you said, 700 Marines as well. That is a sizable number of troops in California. It's not entirely clear what they're all literally doing. Like Gavin Newsom saying half of them are sitting around not doing anything. But what you're saying is essentially a deterrent effect, right? It's a message rather than a military operation.
That's right. That's right. Watching the coverage again, the number of law enforcement in a lot of cases is actually outnumbering the number of people that they're trying to wrangle, especially as they've done this tactical thing where they've built out these pockets and it's smaller groups of protesters. But that's not the point. The point is to create a symbolic standoff here between what they want to paint as Democrats not doing enough to protect their cities and the federal government coming in and taking over. And this is what they want the country to see.
Do you think there's something to the sort of dividing line being created between sort of people who live in these big metropolitan coastal cities and the sort of core Trump supporters as you imagine them? I asked that just because I was watching Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, on Fox News last night. She described Los Angeles as, quote, a city of criminals. That's America's second largest city, right?
I actually think Noem is off message there, which I've seen happen before, because I think that what Trump did during the campaign and that what he's been trying to do in office as well is talk to the sort of more conservative or not hyper progressive city dwellers. I mean, you saw what happened in the Bronx over this election and just how much of New York City that he won. Trump is a city guy. Like, he likes cities. He wants to get their support. And I think that the message that he's been trying to send is we are saving LA. I think Noem was talking much more to the MAGA base. I think President Trump does want the support of folks in those kinds of cities and to show Democrats that he believes he's right and they're wrong, and look at how your own city dwellers are supporting you now. I think he would like to be able to tell that story.
Right. And the people living in those cities don't necessarily want to see their taxis being set on fire, their freeways being shut down, and some of the scenes that we saw, particularly on Sunday night, right? And he knows that and he can lean into that as well.
Yeah, I think the danger is like going overboard there and people seeing their streets militarized and feeling like, wait a minute, like these scenes aren't cool with us either. And then it kind of flipping the other way. And then you get some people that might have not been interested or involved then wanting to stand up. So, you know, the scales can tip pretty quickly here, but it's clear that the White House feels that they are on the right side of this. I asked one of my sources, like, do you think there's any risk to this, to sending active duty military troops on American soil? Like, is there any concern? He said zero, absolutely nothing, no worries about it. So that's the view.
It's a deployment the like of which we haven't seen in this country in decades, as we were saying on the podcast yesterday morning. It will be interesting to hear the Secretary of Defense, Pete Exorth, asked about this morning. He is making his first appearance before a House committee since his confirmation in the post. It's been a long 4 or 5 months for Pete Exorth, I feel, you know, of all the members of the cabinet. His has been a lively tenure, if I can put it that way.
Oh boy, it sure has. From before his tenure even began. Right. He was the toughest nominee to get confirmed in the Senate, as you'll recall.
I remember it all so well. And of course, there was a very good reason for that. And the reason for that was there's never been anybody who's been so, I don't want to call him unqualified, but he's coming from a completely different position to pretty much anyone who's ever done that job before in American history, right? It's a completely different background. The guy's a TV host essentially, and done various other jobs, but nothing like this.
He served in the military, but has never, managed this scale of organization.
And you could make the case that that lack of experience has been borne out from time to time over the past few months, right? Whether you love Pete Exorth or despise Pete Exorth or somewhere in between, there have been moments when he has looked inexperienced, perhaps in the way he set up his team, certainly in the way in his use of certain social media apps.
Let's not forget Signalgate. Let's not forget Signalgate.
Right. They weren't the actions of an experienced 4-star general, right, who's been running this operation for decades.
And that's still playing out in the challenges for the Pentagon right now. NBC News just reported that they're struggling to fill some really key positions like chief of staff that would normally be really coveted, but there's been such disorganization within the department and this exodus of people in those really important positions so early on. It's been quite a mess over there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we'll see Democrats on that committee lining up today to really lay into Pete Exorth over various different issues in different ways. I do suspect that he'll also give as good as he gets. He's quite good at this, isn't he? He's a presentation guy. He went through the toughest, roughest confirmation.
There was so much concern over the nomination process, and he actually did quite well in terms of performance, which of course the president loves to see. And he's excited, I will venture to bet, to go toe-to-toe with some of the Democrats. I think where there's a concern is some Republicans who may have some tough questions, particularly about the defense budget and just the readiness and preparedness of the Pentagon and the Department of Defense. There has been some bipartisan concern. Well, maybe not about the same issues, but there's been different concern on both sides of the aisle.
Do you think they still fully rate him and fully trust him inside the heart of the White House? It has been suggested to me by one or two people that the love for Pete Exorth that was there, say, in December time, and when he came out fighting famously to get that confirmation, may have dissipated a bit over a few months as we've seen him make a few unforced errors, frankly.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference in the conversation between, is he going to get canned versus is he in the good standing that he was at the outset. And I think from everything that I'm hearing so far, his job is safe. In Trump world, it is until it isn't. So I'll keep caveating that. But there aren't active discussions right now about kicking him out. But yes, he has at the very least created distractions from what the White House wants to be talking about. And that is not ideal. And so he's not in the same position with the West Wing that he was some months ago.
Let's try and finish with something a bit lighter than Pete Exorth's career prospects, shall we? Something fun out of the Playbook newsletter. This is fun, actually. An unlikely visitor to the MAGA world hotspot Butterworth's on Monday night. That's a restaurant in DC for the uninitiated. Who was seen there, Dasha? Tell us.
Well, I can't believe I'm saying this because, in 2022, I would have said you're absolutely insane. Let's get you some help. John Fetterman, senator from Pennsylvania, and Steve Bannon apparently hung out at dinner for about 20 minutes. It looks like Fetterman was dining with MAGA-friendly journalist Matt Boyle, and Bannon came by, sat for about 20 minutes. One could only venture to guess what they were talking about, but a pretty remarkable scene to think about given where Fetterman started and where he's at now.
It's like one of those games where you sort of pick your random dinner party guests, isn't it, to try and create an interesting scene. You pick this very outspoken Democrat.
Honestly, I would go to that dinner party. I want to hear that conversation.
Well, you know where to go. Butterworth's and Capitol Hill.
Is this an ad for Butterworth's now?
I fear it's becoming that. Wash my mouth out. Okay, all right. We better stop there before we give them far too much publicity. Thank you, Dasha. That was great.
Thanks, Jack.
That's all we've got time for today. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter. As always, you can find that at politico.com/playbook. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Tuesday.
Hang in there, everybody.